Okay, let's move on to the tricky bit now. If we go and have a look at task 3. Task 3 says develop your program to detect if any character in the binary string is not a 1 or a 0, print out a suitable message. If it is a binary string, and a suitable message if it's not a binary string. Hint, you'll need a loop to look at each character in turn, and it's loops really that I want to discuss here. You'll also need a Boolean value to set as a flag. I want to introduce what flag really means, indicating if the string is valid or not. So let's go through. This is getting quite technical now. First of all, I'm going to tidy up my program here. Instead of having this being called my variable, I'm going to have it as my binary string, because hopefully I'm going to be able to detect a string that just contains ones and zeros now. So I really want to name it for what it is. So if I just copy that, paste there, paste there. Okay, so my naming convention is a lot better. Didn't need to do that, but it's sort of necessary when you've got many hundreds of lines of code. It's really, really useful to have things that stand for what they hold or what they do. So let's just think about this for a second. At the moment, we've got a program which enters a binary or enters a string. Hopefully it's binary. If not, we're going to check it. We are already checking to see if they entered something at all. If they didn't enter anything, it's going to hit this part of the conditional. If they did enter something, it's going to come down to this block of code here, and it's this block of code that we now want to check whether the string was a binary string or not a binary string. It will only get to this point if they entered something in and just didn't press enter at the keyboard. That's important to understand. So I'm going to talk about the flag for a minute. A flag is what we call a binary digit. A 1 means it's true, a 0 means it's false, and we just call it a flag. In other words, we've flagged up an error, or we've flagged something's happened. So I'm going to start off by setting a flag. And what I'm really looking for is whether this string is valid or not. So I'm going to use the word valid, and I'm going to set it. And I can set it to either true or false. I'm going to start off by setting it to false. When we run our program, if it doesn't work properly, we know we might have to come back and change this for true. So let's take a look at what we're going to try and do. We know we want a loop. That was stated in the task. You will need a loop, and we need a loop because the string, like this string here, has got many characters, and we want to look at every single one in turn and do the same task on it. So all of these letters in here we're going to look at, and we're going to perform the same task on it, and we're going to check whether it's a 1 or a 0. If it is, that's fine, but if it's a letter, then we want to reject the string. Obviously it's not binary if it contains a letter. Now loops, there are two loops in Python. We can have a for loop, or we can have a while loop. We can have either of those loops, not together like that. And really it doesn't matter which one you choose. You can do it with both of them. So I'm going to do that. I'm going to do it for both the for loop and the while loop. The only difference is that we may have to do a bit more coding in the while loop than we do in the for loop, but the while loop may be a bit more efficient when we're trying to work out a string that we don't know how long it is or how short it is. If we know how long it is definitely, let's say 5 characters or 6 characters, then I would probably go for a for loop. If we don't know the length, I would probably go for a while loop. Anyway, each one works in its own little way, so we'll go for this for loop first. So what we can say, and try to keep this again down to what it means. So I'm going to say for each character in my binary string. So I'm almost talking English and coming up with programming. I don't particularly like this, and we'll have a look at this one in a minute, this variable. But at the moment it will do fine for our program. Now what we're going to do for each character in my binary string, so I'm going to look at the first one. Now remember, these are indexed, and the first one is actually 0, then 1, then 2, then 3, and so on. Okay, all strings are indexed from 0 onwards. So for each character in my binary string, what's going to happen is the first time through the loop it's going to be the first character, then it's going to go through the loop again and look at the second character, then the third character, and each time through the loop it's going to look at a different character in here. And all we need to do is check whether that is a 1 or a 0. Not this particular string, but the string that we enter in. So let's code that. So if each character, so that is the variable, so the first time through the loop each character equals the first item, and we'll go through that later. If each character is equal to 1, now I can't write 1 without the quote marks because that would be a number and we're actually looking at a string, so it's actually inside quote marks to make it a string. So if each character is equal to 1 or each character is equal to 0, so on this line of code here we've checked whether that character at that position is a 1 or a 0, and if it is, then we can set our flag valid equals true. And that's basically the loop that we need. That's all we need to do. We started off with it being false, and we're checking each character in the loop, going through it, and if it's a 1 or if it's a 0, we're changing that valid to true. Obviously if we go through all of these and we don't get a 1 or a 0, then valid becomes false. Now maybe you can already see an issue with this, which we will attack later. So that's my first attempt at this loop. I'm going to save the program and run it to see what it does. Oh, first of all, it might be a good idea if we actually printed something out. So when I have finished the loop, I can print valid. So it's either going to print true or false when it's finished the entire loop, and we'll see if we've made any mistakes or not. So file, save as, minitask3.py, and we're ready to go, ready to test it. So if I run my program, remember if I enter nothing at all, it's going to say you didn't enter anything. So that means I've got to enter something. So let's run the program again. Please enter a binary string. I'm just going to enter ABC. Press enter. And false. It's not a binary string because it contained letters. That seems to be working fine. If I run it again, please enter a binary string 1010. Press enter. Whoops. It comes out as true. It seems that the program is doing what we want it to do. The thing that I've got to do is check if I've got a mixed one. So please enter a binary string A100. That is not a binary string. It contains A at the start. Enter. And my answer is true. So we've got a little bit of checking to do in our program before we can be satisfied that we just get a binary string. But we're somewhere in the ballpark. We've got a really good start on what we're doing here. So in the next video we will try to solve what this problem is. Now we've got something called a logical error, not a syntax error. It doesn't crash with a red message, that would be a syntax error, but it's not doing what we want, and that is called a logical error.